During what many still refer to as the golden age of Hollywood, only a handful of women possessed the rare ability to capture the imagination of audiences across the entire world, and among them, Audrey Hepburn stood in a class of her own. Her glowing smile, effortless elegance, and memorable performances in films like Roman Holiday and Breakfast at Tiffany's elevated her into a position of global admiration that few could rival. To millions of admirers, she seemed almost untouched by the passage of time, as though her real life carried the same enchantment as the characters she portrayed on screen. However, behind the brilliance of fame, the applause of audiences, and the iconic images that defined her career, her personal story unfolded in a far more complex and emotional way. She experienced love with deep sincerity, entered into marriage twice, and endured heartbreak on more than one occasion. As her life moved into quieter and more reflective years, a truth slowly revealed itself. Out of all the men she had loved, one remained in her heart in a way she never truly released. Often, the most meaningful love stories do not take place in front of cameras or under bright lights, but instead emerge quietly when the world is no longer paying attention. Before exploring the deeply personal side of this legendary figure, it is worth asking, which Audrey Hepburn film holds such timeless charm that it can be watched again and again without losing its magic? Number 1. William Holden. In the early years of the 1950s, Audrey Hepburn was only beginning to realize the extraordinary future that lay ahead of her. Having survived the hardships of World War II while living in the Netherlands, she arrived in Hollywood carrying a quiet determination along with a natural grace that felt entirely different from the more dramatic personalities within the film industry. She was not driven by a hunger for glamour or fame. At her core, her dreams were simple and deeply personal, centered around the desire for a peaceful life, a loving partner, and the opportunity to build a family of her own. Her major turning point came in 1953 when she was cast in the romantic film Sabrina, a role that quickly transformed her into one of the most admired actresses in the world. Yet while audiences were captivated by what they saw on screen, something equally important was quietly unfolding behind the scenes. It was during this time that she met William Holden. By that point, Holden was already an established star in Hollywood, admired for his confidence, charm, and composed presence. He carried himself with the ease of someone who had long understood the pressures that came with fame. For Audrey, who was still adjusting to her sudden rise and the attention that surrounded her, his presence felt steady and reassuring. As filming continued, their connection grew naturally. They shared light-hearted moments between scenes, and their conversations often extended long after the cameras had stopped rolling. What initially began as a simple friendship gradually deepened into a quiet and sincere romance, one that many people working on the set could sense, even if it was never publicly acknowledged. Audrey's feelings were genuine and deeply felt. However, there was a painful reality that stood in their way. William Holden was already married, a fact that alone complicated everything. Even more heartbreaking was the knowledge that he had undergone a vasectomy years earlier, meaning he could never have children. For Audrey, whose greatest dream was to become a mother, this realization changed everything. The future she had begun to imagine with him was no longer possible. Despite the love that existed between them, she made the difficult and emotional decision to walk away, understanding that sometimes even the strongest love cannot overcome certain realities. Number 2. Mel Farer. After experiencing the quiet heartbreak that came with her relationship with William Holden, Audrey slowly redirected her focus back toward her career. Opportunities in Hollywood began to open in ways she had never expected. Yet despite the admiration and success surrounding her, her desire for something more personal remained unchanged. She longed for emotional stability and a sense of security. It was during this time that she formed a close bond with Mel Farer. He was not simply another figure in Hollywood. He was intellectual, thoughtful, and deeply devoted to the arts. As both an accomplished actor and director, he shared Audrey's passion for theater, literature, and storytelling. Their conversations often moved beyond surface-level exchanges, evolving into deeper discussions about creativity, philosophy, and the meaning of life. For Audrey, This connection felt meaningful and refreshing. In 1954, the two were married in a quiet ceremony held in Switzerland. At the time, many believed she had finally found the partner she had been searching for, someone who truly understood both her professional world and her sensitive nature. For a while, this belief seemed justified. They collaborated on various projects and supported each other's artistic goals. Farer even directed Audrey in the stage production of Ondine, a performance that earned her a prestigious Tony Award. In the public eye, they appeared elegant, united, and admired as one of Hollywood's most refined couples. In 1960, Audrey gave birth to their son, Sean, and motherhood brought her a kind of joy that fame could never provide. Those close to her often noticed that she seemed more peaceful and fulfilled after becoming a mother. However, behind the carefully maintained public image, their marriage gradually began to change. The pressures of Hollywood, demanding schedules, and underlying tensions slowly created distance between them. Over time, what once appeared stable began to show signs of strain. Number 3. Andrea Diddy. As the years went on, Audrey entered a quieter and more reflective phase of her life. Although Hollywood continued to admire her and offer her major roles, she began stepping away from the spotlight. What she desired now was simplicity and peace. It was during a Mediterranean cruise in 1968 that she met Andrea Diddy, an Italian psychiatrist who was intelligent, charming, and very different from the men she had previously known in the entertainment world. Unlike actors and producers, who often lived highly public and dramatic lives, Diddy carried a calm and thoughtful presence. For Audrey, this relationship felt like an opportunity for a fresh start. In 1969, they were married in a private ceremony in Rome, and many of her friends believed this union might finally provide the stable and private life she had always longed for. Soon after, she gave birth to their son, Luca, once again placing motherhood at the center of her world. She spent much of her time between Italy and Switzerland, focusing on raising her children rather than pursuing new roles in film. For a time, life felt balanced and full of hope. However, gradually, signs of trouble began to emerge. Reports began circulating that Diddy was involved with other women. At first, Audrey tried to ignore these rumors, determined to make the marriage work after already experiencing heartbreak. Yet as time passed, the whispers continued, and the emotional distance between them became impossible to ignore. The peaceful life she had imagined began slipping away once again. By the early 1980s, their relationship came to an end, marking another chapter in her search for lasting love. The disappointment she felt was familiar, yet no less painful. By the late 1970s, Audrey Hepburn had already lived a life that most people could hardly imagine. She had become one of the most celebrated actresses of the 20th century, admired worldwide for her roles in Roman Holiday, Sabrina, and Breakfast at Tiffany's. Her elegance, kindness, and unmistakable style had made her an enduring symbol of classic Hollywood. Yet by this stage, fame no longer held the same appeal. Following the end of her marriage to Andrea Diddy, she made a quiet but meaningful decision to step away from the film industry and focus on what mattered most to her, her children. She often expressed that motherhood brought her a deeper sense of fulfillment than any award or standing ovation ever could. She devoted herself to raising Sean and Luca, striving to give them the stable childhood she herself had not fully experienced. These years were far quieter than her earlier decades, but they carried deep personal meaning. Dividing her time between Switzerland and California, she embraced a life that felt refreshingly ordinary compared to the fast-paced world of Hollywood. During the 1980s, another transformation began to take shape as she devoted herself to humanitarian work with UNICEF. Having experienced the hardships of war during her childhood, she felt a strong connection to children suffering around the world. She traveled to some of the most difficult regions, speaking openly about poverty, hunger, and the importance of compassion. This mission gave her life a renewed sense of purpose and direction. Number 4. Robert Walders. It was during this quieter chapter that she met Robert Walders. By the early 1980s, Audrey was no longer the young actress moving from one film set to another. Her life had shifted toward family, reflection, and humanitarian work. She had experienced love, marriage, and heartbreak, and had come to understand that fame did not always bring happiness. Robert Walders, a Dutch actor who had worked in both European and American television, lived far removed from the chaos of Hollywood. He was gentle, thoughtful, and carried a quiet confidence that felt comforting rather than overwhelming. They met around 1980 through mutual friends rather than public industry events, marking the beginning of a different kind of relationship. Their bond developed gradually, built on shared understanding, meaningful conversations, and similar life experiences. Both had European roots and memories shaped by wartime, allowing them to connect on a deeper level. Unlike her previous relationships, this one was not surrounded by publicity or drama. There were no headlines, no scandals, only companionship. They spent their time traveling, enjoying peaceful moments together, particularly in Switzerland, away from the spotlight. As the years passed, Audrey's life became increasingly distant from the glamour that once defined it. Film sets, premieres, and flashing cameras faded into memory, replaced by family, humanitarian work, and the steady presence of Robert Walders. Having experienced emotional challenges in earlier relationships, she found something different with him. Their connection was not built on intensity or public attention, but on patience, kindness, and mutual respect. He supported her humanitarian efforts with UNICEF, often traveling alongside her as she visited communities in need, standing beside her not as a celebrity figure, but as a steady source of strength. Those who visited Audrey during these years often noticed the peaceful rhythm of their life together. They shared simple conversations, meals, and quiet walks away from public attention. For someone who had spent much of her life under constant scrutiny, this sense of normalcy brought deep comfort. In the early 1990s, as Audrey faced a serious illness, Robert Walders remained constantly by her side, offering unwavering support. When she passed away in 1993, he was still there with her. Although they never married, their bond endured until the very end. After a lifetime of searching for lasting love, it was this final relationship that ultimately brought Audrey Hepburn the peace she had always longed to find.